Safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
Have you ever met a 911 professional and asked, what's the worst call you've ever taken? Well, here's your answer. I heard your last breath the night you flipped your four-wheeler. I tried to call you the day you committed suicide by driving your car into a tree. Blue face, cold to the touch. I helped you with CPR after you found your infant face down, not breathing. It messed me up. I did everything I could, but it wasn't enough. You were with me from the beginning, Grandma. 27 years later, I took the 911 call when you died. How fitting to be there for me in the beginning, and I was there for you in the end. I miss you, Grandma. I am 911. This is but a glimpse into the world of emergency dispatch. But what is it really like to answer a call during someone's nightmare? What is the impact on the first responder answering the call? From Titletown Publishing, and available on Amazon or where you purchase your favorite books and ebooks. Imagine listening. Your worst day is our everyday. If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned. Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be episode 524 of Within the Trenches, True Stories from the 911 Dispatchers Who Live Them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader next-gen core services, and a big shout-out, as always, to patrons of the podcast, as well as subscribers on Facebook. Actually, subscribers all over, because subscriptions are going to be added to the community as well on Circle, so a lot of stuff coming up for 2024, and we're already at the end of 2023, man. It is December 28th right now, and this is a special episode. So this is an Imagine Listening episode. All of the Imagine Listening episodes are special. They are just full of powerful stories, some gut-wrenching ones, some saves, all of the above. And this one comes specifically from the Arkansas Conference. I was out there, as well as my friend Dawn. She was out there as well. We were both speakers, and there's a lot of different things going on, and it was an excellent conference. If you have not had a chance to go to the Arkansas Conference, make sure to do so. They do an amazing job, and as I said, this episode is an Imagine Listening episode, and wow, it was something else. And a shout out again and a thank you to my friend Dawn for assisting me during that time. It was an enormous room. There were tons of people in there, and so many stories were shared. And I literally just got done recording the written stories. They are all right here. And there were 30 written stories. And I think that's the highest out of any state that I've gone to do Imagine Listening. And I had to take a few breaks. I will be honest, I had to take a few breaks after reading some of these stories, and you'll see here in just a moment. But I just wanted to thank the Arkansas Conference, everybody in the committee for just being awesome, and of course for all of the attendees for being there at my sessions, for being at this Imagine Listening session, and just for everything that you do. Thank you. And for being willing and open, having the courage to share these stories. It's not an easy thing. So thank you so very much for doing so. And we've got two different pieces here, right? As all of the Imagine Listening episodes go. And so you've got the audio from the audience, right? And then, of course, we have the audio from the written stories that I recorded. So without further ado, this is Imagine Listening, and this is episode 524. Imagine watching your son take off on his four-wheeler. You've witnessed this many times. He rides, he has fun, and all is well. Now imagine you're 911, taking a call from frantic parents who have just found their son underneath his flipped four-wheeler. You listen to the parents scream while they remove it off his body. You tell them that help is on the way, and you give them CPR instructions. An officer arrives, and you listen as he performs CPR. Come on, buddy. Come on, is what you hear over the phone. This is what it's like within the trenches of 911. In this episode, you'll hear stories from the I Am 911 movement, a movement I started to fight for the reclassification of dispatchers from clerical to protective and bring awareness to the types of calls that 911 dispatchers answer on a daily basis. This is an Imagine Listening session, and we are here in Arkansas for the 2023 conference. Now, you heard the warning at the beginning, but I must warn you again and add that if you have PTSD or suicidal tendencies, you are listening at your own risk. The stories you're about to hear are all true and come from the dispatchers who have lived them. While some stories have a good outcome, the majority are horrifying. This is our reality. Your worst day is our everyday. So let's start with a bang. I want you to imagine each story, become the dispatcher who has taken each call, and imagine listening. So before I go to you for any stories that you might have, I just want to say really quick, that call that I just read, that was my story. That was the story that launched the I Am 911 movement. That week that I put that story out there, and also during that time in 2016, one of the shows that was just taking the world by storm at the time on Netflix was a show called Stranger Things. And spoiler alert if you haven't seen it or anything, there is an episode on there where the sheriff has been looking for this kid that's been missing pretty much throughout the whole season. And he finds him, and he starts performing CPR on him. Now, I'm watching this, and I lose my shit. I started crying hard. I didn't realize why in the beginning, but it was because I was now watching exactly the call that I took when I was sitting there listening to the officer do CPR. I couldn't put the phone down. I couldn't hang up because I wanted to hear. I wanted to make sure that kid was going to be okay, which that wasn't the outcome that happened. And he was saying over the phone, come on, buddy, come on. And in that episode, it was the same thing that was happening. And I realized it was a trigger. It's just part of my story. Does anyone have a story that they would like to share out loud?
So, when I first started in 911, I was 3 days in. I was in training. I got sick for lunch. I came back and I can remember it exactly. I walked in, I set the bags of food down, and the phone rang. And I could hear her screams across the room. And she had just found her 15-year-old granddaughter who had shot herself in the head. And she couldn't get to her. The door was locked. She was looking through the front living room window. And I can still hear her scream. And I can picture that day. And now I'm here 8 years later, after my third day being the worst day.
Thank you.
So, dispatching is my second career. I originally was a nurse and worked in ER for, almost 30 years. Thank you very much for sharing. And so my story is not really about what was on the phone, more or less was my feelings about what happened. early on in my career, which was about 5 years ago, I got a call, and this lady I can't even tell you exactly what was going on with her, except she was screaming. She could not wake her son up, and I didn't know what to do because I had been so used to running in and hands-on trying to resuscitate someone in an ER, and all of a sudden I didn't have my hands anymore. All I had was my ears. And trying to talk to this woman and trying to get her to understand that we had help coming, and trying to cope with how I was feeling, which was inadequate and completely did not feel like I was capable of doing this job. I had to struggle through that call with her, and of course the child did not live, but I think the story with me is more how much I didn't feel that I was capable because I didn't have hands. So what we do every day is pretty difficult when you can't do anything at all. You just sit there and listen and get help to them.
Thank you.
Okay. I was new. I had barely been by myself very long, and I got a call from family members that were saying that a woman had posted on Facebook that she needed help. They couldn't tell me her exact address. We had to go through other measures to try to figure out where she was at. So I sent officers. When they got there, her phone was in the driveway. They went in and they said, "We can't find her, but there's blood everywhere." So while this is happening, the family is continuing to call, because they said there's something wrong. We can't get a hold of her. She's not answering. About that time, we received a call from the hospital, and they stated that they had had a woman show up, and she had drove herself to the hospital while holding her neck closed because she had been cut from ear to ear. Because they got over there as quickly as they did, they went right over and were able to apprehend the man that had done this, and I think that if we had not sent help for him to leave when he did, she may not have made it to the hospital. So as quickly as we work, everything matters and every second counts, and we make a difference. And she's alive and well today.
Thank you.
So this was several years ago at this point. I don't remember, all that much, but there are several things that stand out. It was an older woman caller, and she said he got into my house and he was trying to take my car. Didn't know who the guy was, could hear him in the background screaming, sounded like he was drunk or high or something, just the way he was going on. And all this woman could say was, "He got into my house, here's my address." And the next thing you start hearing is, this guy is beating this poor woman within an inch of her life. And she was able to hold on long enough and keep him off her, to where I could get people on scene. And as soon as he saw the lights outside, he started running, and then just her started gurgling just over the phone. And that's the last thing I heard before an officer came into the house, and luckily was able to get him and her to the hospital fast enough, and he wound up in prison, and he's still there.
Thank you for sharing. December 2021. A 911 call came in with a female screaming, "Help! She's not breathing. I need mom." Me, 911. "Can I help?" "Mom, she's not breathing. Mom." Who? Who, the baby?" "Mom, help." The screaming continues. The caller was my daughter. The she, my grandbaby. My partner continued CPR as I left to be with my daughter and my grandbaby that passed from SIDS. I am 911. December 2012 and January 13, I was pregnant with our fifth boy. During these months, I worked 6 SIDS deaths. We are a small community. I knew the moms. Some graduated with our older boys. I still feel their pain when I see them, and my justice is with me. Their pain and emptiness will always be with me. I am 911. I cannot immediately recall every 911 call I have taken over the last 14 years. But when asked about a particular call or incident, there hasn't been one that I have forgotten. They are forever with us. I am 911. I can't remember dates. I've been dispatching since I was 20. For the last 12, I've been in the county I grew up in. My brother was also a deputy in my county. There was a call that neither one of us will never forget. A young girl, just starting her adult life. She didn't go to work that day. Her coworkers started calling and texting her. She was not in a good mindset, and her coworkers noticed that. They called dispatch and was giving us updates. They only knew that she was on a bridge. I gave my brother out the call. He started going to all the bridges. He found her at the second bridge he checked. Right before he pulled up, she had shot herself in the head. I am 911. In 1998, I answered a call with a male caller and a screaming female. The male turned out to be one of our lieutenants, and their infant was not breathing. He was doing CPR on his infant while his wife screamed, "My baby." That infant had passed away from SIDS. I am 911. I answered a 911 call with a female that advised she had shot herself in the head with her husband's hunting rifle, and she was pregnant. I asked her name, and she gave it to me. That's when I found out I had known that caller all her life. She did live. So did the baby. But she had lengthy therapy to return to a somewhat normal life. I am 911. I listened as you found your 15-year-old daughter hanging from her ceiling fan. She had killed herself because you had arranged a marriage for her, and the man had decided not to go through with it. She killed herself because she thought she had disgraced and dishonored her family. You blamed yourself. I had to console you and not judge. I am 911. I took the call when you found your 11-year-old son in the backyard with maggots all over him. You told me you woke up and he wasn't in his bed. He found your gun and took it outside to play with it. I heard the guilt in your voice of your son finding your own gun. I am 911. I took the call when you found your son hanging from a tree in the backyard. I recognized the address and the name. I was the same age as he was. I played baseball with him. You were our coach. I am 911. One of the off-duty deputies had a four-wheeler accident. The phone service was awful. He coded several times before he was airlifted to the hospital. I am 911. The worst call I ever took was the death of a 3-month-old baby. It turned out the mother killed the child. When she called, she said she woke up and the baby died. My heart broke for her until I found out she killed the child. All this happened on Christmas morning. She is still in jail for murder. I am 911. I was with you as you prayed for your husband to stay with you. Fighting through tears, we gave him CPR until the medics arrived. We disconnected. Medics called out code blue, and then, a while later, called out return of spontaneous circulation. We did it together. You did it. I am 911. I listened as you screamed for towels for your 13-year-old son's head after he pulled the trigger. Your voice, screams, and vision replay in my head. My son was 13 too. I pray for you every day. I am 911. I had a teenage boy call. He was with his friends at Cece's Pizza. The friend driving didn't get out of the car. He turned around and watched that friend lock the doors and shoot himself in the head. I could tell he was about to lose control talking to me. All I could do was get everyone sent. I am 911. It was Parents' Weekend on campus, a weekend that is meant to be filled with happy family reunions. Your daughter sent your family goodbye messages the night before you were supposed to leave. We found her body the next afternoon after a day of searching. You found out we found her vehicle on social media. I will never forget your phone calls screaming and begging to confirm she was dead. She was only a year younger than me. I will never forget. I am 911. I took the call. You call weekly. You call for shortness of breath. I have always talked to you, and EMS showed up. But this night was different. You had flashed. Your breathing was the worst I had ever heard. I yell at the dispatch, make sure the crew knows they need CPAP. I heard you take your last breath. Then, you hit the floor. EMS was still 10 minutes out. I talked to you and stayed with you. I knew you were gone, but I did not want you to be alone. I just kept telling you, I am with you, until the crew was with you. I just did not want you to die alone. I am 911. It was a normal, if that actually exists, Sunday in dispatch. I was training our new hire when we got a 911 call. It was from our local coroner, who I have spoken to often. He was reporting an unattended death and needed officers. I recognized the address immediately. It was my grandparents' house, and my terminally ill grandfather had passed away. I entered and dispatched the call as normal, then cried in the bathroom. I returned to dispatch and finished the rest of my 12-hour shift. Being strong was learned through my time in dispatch. I am 911. I took a call with an 11-year-old caller. He and a group of his friends had found his dad's gun. He had shot his friend. I tried to calm the group as they were home alone and got help as quick as I could. The kid didn't make it. I am 911. I was on the radio when your emergency tones went off. At the same time, we had an incoming emergent call of a male that had his throat cut in a domestic disturbance. You were yelling you had been shot. I had to choose to send my last available EMS truck to you over the other call. My officer made it. The male did not. I am am 911. I took a call from a 12-year-old girl who just witnessed her 17-year-old brother shoot her best friend in the head. I helped her struggle with the horror of what just happened, what she was still looking at, and the reality that her best friend was not breathing. I stayed in the line with her, even after officers and medics arrived, because they had their priorities, but I could not let that baby stand there, scared and alone. I called her mother, explained what I could, and stayed in the line until that little girl could have someone there to wrap their arms around her. I am 911. I heard you screaming. I didn't stop. Over and over when you found your 11-year-old son hanging in his closet. All I could say was, I know you didn't, until help got there and took over CPR. He didn't make it. I'm so sorry. I am 911. I listened to you cry about being all alone in the world after you found your daughter and grandbabies murdered. I dispatched help as you described the blood everywhere. I Googled it not that long ago and learned they had been tortured and murdered for money they never had. I am 911. I took a call from an elderly female. She was hysterical because her husband was just shot and killed when he answered the door. She had no idea who had done it or if he would be coming back. She did not have a cell phone, just a corded home phone. She kept asking if she could go to her husband. I stayed on the phone with her, told her to put the phone down, but don't hang up. That way, I could hear if the suspect came back. I listened to her cry until the officers got there. I'm a widow and understood her pain. I am 911. I took a call from a 13-year-old boy that had locked himself and his two younger siblings in the bedroom because his dad was trying to beat and kill his mother. I could hear the yelling from the dad, the screams from the mom, and the crying from the younger kids. I stayed on the phone trying to reassure the kids until the officers finally had the parents in custody and made contact with the kids. That 13-year-old saved his mom's life. I am 911. I listened as you screamed out, afraid to check on him. All you and his younger siblings heard was a gunshot. Your 19-year-old stepson had accidentally just shot himself in the head as he was going to sleep. He had just bought the gun and was so happy and proud of himself. The only one brave enough to check on him was his 13-year-old brother. As soon as he walked into that room, all we heard was a blood-curdling scream, knowing he was gone. I will forever remember those screams. I am 911. I took a 911 call from a woman. Her son was missing. I got all of the information needed for deputies to identify when they got there. Clothing, height, weight, age, name. I told her that I would stay with her until he was found. She was walking around her property screaming his name. She heard screaming and started running toward the screaming. I asked who was screaming. She said, out of breath, my daughter. I said, okay, let me know what is happening when you get to her. She started screaming. She said, my son is dead. Oh my God, and screamed. I stayed with her until deputies got on scene. She screamed the entire time. The child had been mauled by a pit bull. I am 911.
I helped you through CPR when you found your 2-month-old not breathing. I will always remember the screams and desperation in your voice while you tried to wake him up. He did not make it. I am 911. I clocked in for my morning shift. I counted CPR reps with you as your husband yelled I wasn't helping. I continued to count for 17 long minutes until rescue got on scene. I listened to rescue ask what happened. I cried in between reps. I felt helpless with you. I am 911. She answered the call for my cousin. She picked up the phone and heard his girlfriend crying. He hung himself. She's my coworker. When I came back after his funeral, she cried. I told her she did a good job, and I thanked her. I am 911. I walked you through how to do CPR on your wife. I stayed in the line with you for 25 minutes till help arrived. 30 minutes later, they transported her to ER because they got a pulse back. I am 911.
Early in my career, I started out as a dispatcher in South Arkansas. And I worked with the fire department at that time. And I worked every day, not every day, but I worked many shifts with a coworker. His first name is Jimmy. And all of a sudden one day I came in and he was down in the dumps and he was upset because his high school sweetheart that he had been married to for over 20 years had left him. And the worst part of it to him, for him, and I apologize if this offends, is that she had left him for a white male. He stayed depressed. And then the day before Thanksgiving, I was working with him and he hadn't been sitting on the back steps that led up to the break room area of the fire department in months. He was sitting up at the very top step as usual that day. He had a cup of coffee and he was smoking, and when he would see me walking up, he would say, "Good morning, sunshine." And his whole persona and attitude had completely flipped. I did go to our shift commander and ask for it to be off record, and I explained to my shift commander that I thought that our friend, I was prepared to do something because of the drastic change. Shift commander started yelling and saying that I better not tell that to anyone else because I was trying to ruin our friend's career, which was not so. I had volunteered to work Thanksgiving Day so that other people could have Thanksgiving with their families. And at 11:35 on Thanksgiving, I get a 911 call, and it's Jimmy. And he said, "Hello, sunshine." He said, "You're gonna hate me for the rest of your life." He said, "But when I saw you were working overtime and working today," he said, "I wanted to make sure the last voice I heard was a friendly voice and someone that I knew cared about me as a person and was my friend." He said, "I'm going to tell you where I am." And he said, "I've done something." And I said, "Oh," I said, "Jimmy, what?" He said, "Well," he said, "I just shot and killed my wife and her boyfriend." He told me that they were at their house. And I said, "Oh, Jimmy." I said, "Whatever you do," I said, "the rest of it we can work out." I said, "I'll walk through it with you, do whatever." And he goes, "No." He said, "You pretty well knew I had something planned." And he said, "And I did." And he said, "I just wanted to tell you where we are so that y'all know where to pick up our bodies." And he said, and I'm letting you know on the recorded line that I was the one that did it. Next thing I know, he shot himself. And he was so far out in our county that it took him 7 minutes to pass. And I'm just now starting to be able to share this, because that was my very worst day in dispatch, knowing that you're listening to someone that you care about and we're fairly close to, because we worked long shifts together, and listening to him pass. And that's my story.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Earlier this year, I started as administrator for my department, and I worked with the previous administrator for about 4 years, every morning day shift with them and everything. And one of the first calls in the morning, working in there by myself, was his best friend found him at his house, unresponsive, and you know, in between crying and trying to get her to give him CPR and everything, getting everybody en route out there, all I had to say was his name to the ambulance and his name over the fire radio. It's his house, and everybody knew where to go. He ended up passing. He didn't make it, but working in a small area, so often we get those that are close to us.
Thank you.
So I've been with this department for over 21 years. We consider ourselves, me and my children and my husband, a true blue line family. My husband did 28 years with the police department, and each one of my 4 children, 3 daughters, were dispatchers, and my son is a police officer. So a girl that was very close to my daughters decided she wanted to do it, and I talked her into it, and she came to work for our department. I was her CTO, and I trained her, and she was still in training. Long story short, she had to trade out some time, so I let her go home at 2 o'clock. Unbeknownst to me, a coworker was taking a call of a female that was threatening to jump off a bridge. Again, I was across the room, didn't know what bridge she was talking about, and I sent my quote unquote adopted daughter home that night early, just to get a phone call on 911 from her saying, I think I just ran over a deer. There was something in the road and I hit it, and I've stopped down the road. So I called my son, who was at home, told him to drive and go meet with her, to be with her, because she didn't know what it was. When I mentioned that to my coworker, she said, what bridge did she drive under? And it was the same exact bridge that the girl jumped off of. When my son got there, I called him and I said, if you can, pull her to the side and don't let you see her, or see you, but look under her car, and by any chance, if you see anything, let me know. Sure enough, there was parts of a body under her car. This happened over 13 years ago, and to this day, I blame myself for talking her into doing this career. That I have seen a lot of things happen in 21 plus years. A lot of people have died on the other end of the phone with me. And to this day, she still has nightmares. And I was the one who had to call her mother and father at home and have them drive an hour to go pick her up.
and explain to her what happened. And for me, it's hard to love and put 120% in this job when I realize that it can hit so close to home on any given day. And I honestly feel that you have to be a true compassionate person. And he talked about being human. And you do have to be human. You have to be able to put yourself in their situation. No matter how many times you get the phone call from the girl that gets beat up by their husband and they keep bailing them out of jail or going back to them, you don't know the whole story. Or the person who you just lost your mother to cancer and you're taking a call from someone who just found their mother dead. It's hard to compartmentalize with this job. But if you just continue, even after 13 years, you continue to remember why you're doing it and who you're doing it for, it helps you get through to the end.
Thank you so much. Can I hug you? Thank you.
Not too long after I started, I took a call from a mom. She was concerned about her 13, 14-year-old daughter. She was with her grandma, and she was having a mental break. She kept stating that her daughter wanted to kill herself. I asked her where she was, and she was just outside of our jurisdiction, so I sent it to our county, and they were sending people out there. About 10 minutes later, I received another call from someone who had just witnessed an accident. A tracker-type vehicle had just ran into a concrete pillar of a bridge, about 50, 60 miles an hour. Didn't brake, didn't do anything. And I knew that this was that child that had gotten the keys to the vehicle because it was right down that area. Mom called just after that, and I couldn't tell her where her daughter was. I couldn't tell her to go out there. I just told her that help was on the way, but I knew that that child had taken her life, and I could get her any help.
Thank you for sharing.
I've been doing this job for 25 years, and my worst call was from one of our officers who was having a mental breakdown. I knew him and his family. His wife was our sheriff's secretary. I took his twin daughters to church with me every Sunday, and he knew I was working, and he called 911 to tell me that the new medicine they had put him on didn't work, and he didn't want his wife to find his body. I did everything I could on that phone to talk him out of it. He told me to tell his wife and daughters that he loved them and that it wasn't his fault. And before the other officers could get to him, I heard the gunshot over the phone. I helped his wife plan his funeral. And I still babysit the twin girls' daughters to this day. But we miss him every day, and I will never not hear that gunshot every time I see one of them.
Thank you so much for sharing.
I started in 911 in 2001, and in 2003, I took a call on midnight shift. We only had the basic blue screen DOS, 911, no mapping. It just said verify address, verify phone number, verify response. And we didn't have any tools other than just our mental acuity and listening to background noise to try to find out what was going on. But it was a woman screaming, my baby, my baby, my baby, my baby, high pitched. You all know the tone in their voice. And I could not find out what was going on. That's all she would scream. It was a cell phone, a couldn't get a plot, I couldn't get anything, I couldn't get a phone number. It took an eternity. It was probably only 5 or so minutes, but it seemed like forever because she was not breaking that hysteria threshold at all. And an officer drove by one of our area trailer courts and saw the glow from the road and screamed out he thinks he's seen the house fire, get full assignment. He gets there and I hear his siren in the background. That is the most beautiful sound in the world. Ended up that a lamp had fallen over in the children's room. It didn't have a shade on it. It caught a polyester blanket on fire. It trapped a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old in the front of a 1970s era house fire. 1970s era trailer, which go up like tinder boxes. Mom was burned over the top half of her body. She had gone in trying to get babies out. They got the boy who was burned over 60% of his body. The little girl, they couldn't find her. The dad was burned. The officer was trying so hard to get first aid that they get there. On second search, they find her curled up in her bed. And I had a child about the same age. I went home. My captain called my husband and said, watch her. Had a bad call. About the same age as y'all's little ones, so just watch her. I woke up, everything was fine. You know how we all do, everything's fine. I'm watching the news and I see her picture. And I had to call in that night because I was hysterical. We unfortunately still have warrants on the boy. He survived, but the trauma was too much. The parents divorced, the trauma was too much. And I think of her every year about this time because it happened in November.
Thank you for sharing.
I moved over to medical dispatching a few years ago, and one of the things that I took for granted was I moved to a private agency that lost any alley access when the 3D network went down because we're secondary. I took a call in an area that is a little bit further from where I'm from, and it was a dad and his son was hiking, and the dad had collapsed, and the son was not familiar with the trails that they were on, only that they had a color assigned to them and that he had been on the trail for about an hour. And there were no tools to get his address. I didn't have Rapid SOS at the time. I didn't have anything to find his location. So after about 10 minutes of just trying everything I knew, I finally got him to send me a pin through Google Maps to my private phone. And we were able to get the crew to walk in, but it took them a very long time to get there. Like she said, it felt like eternity. It probably was not an eternity, but it felt like it. And meanwhile, I had him doing compressions the whole time, just urging him on, and he never stopped compressions, even though I know he was exhausted. And the crews finally got there, and it ended up being a field termination. But at the end of the call, and I'll never forget this, he thanked me, and I have never felt so inadequate than being thanked for letting someone down. So one of the things that I learned from that was, even with all the technology that we have, there's always going to be a moment where it's never enough. And the skills that you have are to be proud of, and you're more capable than you think, and you're worthy of that appreciation.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for what you do. And this is a good thing. It might not seem like it. But again, for a long time, it was like we didn't have the chance to feel. We just had to bottle it up and continue. Well, it's a new day, and we're talking. Thank you for everything that you do, and for those who shared, and for those, if you didn't share, it's okay, because you're in here in support of each other. It's hard for me to explain to people what it's like to be in a session like this, to be with a group of people that you can feel safe with, to share stories because they know exactly what it's like, what you're going through, to be there, to listen. And others who will listen to this later will understand as well, even more so, what it is that you do. So a round of applause for everyone who shared, please. And that was the Imagine Listening session, once again, from the 2023 Arkansas Conference. And a big thanks, again, as I said in the beginning of this episode, to everyone at the conference for having me there, for just being awesome. The hospitality, second to none. It was so good. It felt like family there, and especially to the attendees for being there, welcoming me in, and for sharing your stories. Thank you so very much. And of course, as always, thank you to my homie Dawn. A lot of stuff happened there. It was an excellent conference, but this session just completely blew me away. Once again, there was 30 stories that were written down. Is the most from any state, as far as I can remember. And you just heard all of those stories. Very powerful. Very just, there's no words that can really explain. It's hard for me to explain what it is like to be in a room where these stories are being shared, and there are people in there that know exactly what you're going through. The amount of emotion that goes into sharing these stories, the things that we go through when we listen to people during what could be a literal nightmare, and we are the voice within the trenches of 911 to help them out. It's hard to explain. But that's why this show is important. That's why Imagine Listening is important. The I Am 911 movement that share these stories. So thank you again, all of you, for what you do. And going into this new year, I hope this current one has been a good one for you. But I also hope that going into the next one, it gets even better. Any heartache, anything that you may have gone through, let's push that out. Let's just move forward. We can do this together. And we can do it especially through the power of storytelling, which is what we have been doing all of these years. With this podcast, with Imagine Listening, with the movement, all of it. Again, thank you for what you do and for being you, the amazing you. Keep doing what you do. But if you need help, please reach out. And if there are others out there that you haven't heard from lately, reach out to them, call them, say hello. We need all of you here. So again, thank you so very much. And for an amazing 2023, it has been awesome and so good. There have been some things, of course, as always, that go south. People turn their backs. But they're the ones who are going to get left behind. And we just keep moving forward and doing what we do. And that's kicking ass, taking names, and changing the landscape, the culture of our profession of 911. So a big thanks, as always, goes out to In Digital for being a sponsor and being a sponsor going into 2024 as well. Thank you so very much. That is In Digital, Leader Next Gen Core Services, and then all of you as well subscribers of the podcast, whether it be on Patreon, Facebook, or Circle. And of course, all of you who are watching, listening, and supporting and sharing, because without all of you, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. This would not be what it is without all of you. So thank you. For 2023, we have surpassed 2.2 million downloads, and we are heard in over 60 countries. So thank you. This can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, X, as well as LinkedIn, and clips are on Instagram Reels as well as TikTok. And you can also be a guest on the podcast as well. I've got a list of people for 2024, but I am always looking for awesome guests. So if you have any comments, questions, or you ever want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. And for all the social media, where to find everything else, where to purchase the Imagine Listening book, pre-order book number 2, just simply go down to that link that's right there. And for those who are listening, it is links.co/WTT podcast. That is links with 2 I's.co/WTT podcast. And this can be heard 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and within the trenches.net. Have a good one, everyone, and we will see you in the next one.